easy game. I'm actually standing on the 18th green of the West Midlands Golf Club. This is their signature hole. As you can see, it's surrounded by water. They drive off from over there where the swans are. It's actually only 140 yards. But Nigel, the owner of the golf course, was telling me that just before Christmas last year, they took out 6,000 balls, so not everybody has a hole-in-one. Despite the fact that we're in the centre of the West Midlands, this really is a beautiful part of the countryside, and the golf course goes all around us. There's another plane taking off now. Let's go and see how Dave's getting on. Morning. Doing a bit of baking, are you?
Morning.
Few fairy cakes.
Like that.
What's that all about?
It's for mixing my ground bait, actually.
It's wonderful.
I tell you what, it takes a lot of hard work out of it. You think back down the years when we've been mixing like 10 kilos of ground bait by hand.
So you're
But,
using 2 cars these days, are you?
you need it, David, with all the gear I'm carrying.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. But it does make a...
It's fantastic.
It's a very nice mix,
I've mixed up a couple of bags of ground bait there in seconds, really, and it's absolutely.
And what's
perfect.
in there, Dave?
Well, it's mainly a fish meal mix. I'm using a Dynamite ground bait swim stim natural, mixed 50-50 with some brown crumb. Real simple mix, fairly damp.
And what's the object of the exercise?
Well, I've been here about an hour so far, and the fishing's quite good. But I came to catch, specifically, I wanted to catch some bream today. And what's happened? I've just been cupping in with pellets and casters and what have you. And all I can catch at the moment is carp. So I fancy if I put a bit of ground bait in, that maybe I might be able to get a few bream. So that's the game.
Well, it's always worked in the past.
Well, hopefully it'll work today.
So this is Plan B.
Indeed. I quite fancy this to work, to be honest with you. I've so far all I've done this morning is just mix it with pellets, and all I've been using is these little things called toss pots that fit on
You
the end of
endorse
a pole.
them, do you?
Yeah. I knew you'd say that. These just fit on the end of a pole, which we'll come back to a little bit later on. We'll do it again, but basically I've just been fixing that to the end of my pole tip and just feeding small amounts of pellets tight to the end of the pole, and on the hook I've been using expander pellets like this. But like I say, I can't catch any bream, and I've just got a sneaky feeling that by doing this with chop worm and caster and introducing maybe 2 or 3 balls, I think it could work.
I think you and I must be in a minority of 2 of preferring to catch a 3-pound bream to a 10-pound carp.
I mean, carp enjoy eating these sort of baits anyway, but I just feel I'll give myself a better chance by feeding like that. And the way I'm going to do it is by using this pole cup on the end of the pole. It's just a screw-on cup. I want to keep everything really accurate today. And one of the problems on a commercial fishery like this is that if you spread your bait too much, you'll end up foul-looking too many fish. The idea is to keep the bait really tight and then just fish to the edge of where the bait's gone in.
Incredibly accurate, that, isn't it?
That is the beauty of pole fishing, isn't it? I mean, my rigs are set up, my actual top sets are set up the exact same length, if you look, as the pole cup, right? So when I go out, I know exactly I'm going to the same place every time.
And I've often said that most people, when it comes to fishing, particularly competition anglers, are 90% very good. But it's that 10%, isn't it, that sets the very top people
without doubt.
Apart. You and I, working on a fishing magazine, spend our lives writing about new baits. There's still not much better bait around, is there, than the humble worm?
It's a fantastic bait. It wins a lot of competitions, doesn't it, and catches an enormous amount of fish. I think every fish that swims eats a worm. It's a brilliant bait, really.
I've been catching some very big perch on fishing a whole lobworm, and it's a devastating.
You had a massive one, didn't you?
3.9. 3.9.
I've never had one that big.
I sent an email. I said, I've caught this 3-pound. Well, I had 3 actually. I had 2.2, 2.9, and 3.9.
Fantastic.
I sent this email around and said, but don't tell anybody. There's only you and the other 168 people. I've sent this text.
Yeah, you sent that to me, actually.
The development of pole fishing has been phenomenal, hasn't it?
You know, when I first started pole fishing would probably be the late 70s, and I remember purchasing like a 7-metre glass fibre pole, an old Goblino SLV.
Yeah. In a wonderful case.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It seemed fantastic at the time, but 7 metres, and then an extension became available to take it up to 8.5 metres.
In a second case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it weighed a ton really by comparison. I mean, the real development with poles and the way fishing has changed with poles is carbon fibre, of course. You know, once carbon came available.
And I remember nice one.
Another carp by the feel of it.
If that's a bream, it's a big one.
As you can see, this ground bait is very good for bream.
What elastic are you on?
Well, I'm doing a bit of experimenting today. I've set up a couple of different tops. I mean, I carry lots of different elastics now. I mean, this one's a fairly recent development from Drennan. It's a hollow elastic. I mean, more and more people are switching to hollow elastics now because they're quite forgiving. It is a bream.
It is a bream.
I think that's just gone round him, David. I'm not sure. Or it might be foul hooked. We'll have a look.
No, David Harrell doesn't foul hook fish. Ivan Marks used to.
Don't tell anyone, but it is.
Yeah, nice little fish.
Yeah, that's what we came for.
Yeah. Still one of my favourite fish. If you were advising somebody who was buying his first pole, particularly in view of the fact that today, that was a bite, you know, most decent poles come with 2 or 3 top kits. How would you suggest that, and let's say they, general angler, fishing places like this, how would you advise them to set the kits up? What elastics would you use?
Well, first of all, David, there's some fantastic buys out there now on poles. I mean, there is some really good deals, and I think that the key to it really is deciding how much you want to spend. Well,
all our market research indicates that the average angler does not spend any more than £500 on a pole.
Yeah.
So
what he needs to consider then is the package that he can get for that £500. I mean, there's a lot of companies now providing poles with a lot of spare kits, you know, and I think that's important, because if you want to set up several top kits to fish for carp, to fish for bream, to fish for roach and whatever, you know, you need to fork out a lot more money on top of your 500 if that is your actual budget. So, you know, shop around, and there's some great deals about. And then you need just to think about what you want to do with the pole. I mean, most people that fish on commercials like this are fishing essentially for bigger fish. You know, so you need to gear up with 2 or 3 different elastics, maybe a number 6, maybe a number 10, and maybe something like a number, say 14. You know, I mean, more and more people are switching to hollow elastics, like I said. But just make sure really that you're covered. It's about balanced tackle. You know,
well, we talked about this, didn't we?
Very much so, and the same thing applies. You know, if you're going to be fishing with small hooks and fine lines, it's no good gearing it up to a really heavy elastic. There's another fish. I'm actually foul looking 1 or 2 here now. It's no good gearing it up. You need to keep everything in check. So basically, if you're using line diameters of say 0.10 or 0.12 millimetre, which is about 2 or 3 pound, it's ideally suited to say like a number 6 or a number 8 elastic. Conversely, when you're going on heavier lines, then you want to be using heavier elastics. You know, just all about balance.
It must be very confusing for today's angler, really, fishing waters like this one or Docklow where we were, because you don't know what you're going to catch, do you?
No.
And you can suddenly find yourself on latched into a double-figure carp. Well, you know, number 6 or number 10's elastic even, you've not got much chance, have you?
Well, that's always the risk that you take on a mixed fishery like this, you know, but I think you need some sort of start. Obviously you need a starting point on the day. Now, for instance, if I started to catch big fish today, then I would simply switch to a heavier rig. You know, maybe I might lose 1 or 2 fish, but once that happens, I wouldn't continually keep losing them. I'd just scale everything up to suit.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. All my top kits, I mean, I've got probably a dozen top kits in my bag. Everything's suited to the different lines, you know. So
Yeah.
even if double figure can't move into the swim, then I've got gear to suit it.
Ooh,
Oh,
yes. Kiting to the right, as they used to say.
all right, this is another foul hooker.
This is a decent fish.
There's a problem. If you get a lot of fish in your swim, you can foul hook them. Like I said earlier, I mean, I try to keep the bait fairly tight and then give myself the option of just fishing to the edge of it. Now, you imagine putting your bait on something like the size of a dustbin lid and then just fishing on the outside of it. You know, it just gives you that chance to eliminate some of your foul hookers.
I think what you're proving here is that anybody who is contemplating buying a pole and taking up pole fishing, that the days of just having one top kit are long gone, aren't they? This is a nice fish.
Nice bream, actually. I thought that was a carp.
It is. I tell you what, they're hard fighting fish, aren't they? I noticed, Dave, that you've got two keep nets.
Yeah, well, it's actually a fishery rule here, David. Use one net for silverfish and one for carp. And I think it's a good idea. Obviously, if you're catching fish like roach and what have you, then the two don't mix that well. You know, when you come to the weigh-in, if you've got sort of 60 or 70 pounder carp, you don't want small roach in amongst them.
These have been remarkable, haven't they, pellets? Who'd have thought that, you know, one-day match anglers, this was a specimen hunter's bait, wasn't it? Pellets, I mean...
It's been an incredible revolution, hasn't it, really? And it's such a cheap way of fishing. I mean, you can have a really good day's fishing for, what, £5? Perhaps less than that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a really good way of going out.
And you just soak them, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, those pellets that you got in the hand there, they're just 4mm hard pellets, which I just prepared this morning before I set off from home. And basically, you just put a measure of pellets in, there's about a pint in the tub there, and just cover it with water and let the water soak into the pellet just to make it nice and soft for feeding.
And what's that?
And
Pounds worth? 50 pence?
Oh yeah, 50p.
Amazing, amazing.
And then we've got a little pot of hook baits. They just expander pellets. There's another fish. Ah, was a fish, come off. They're just expander pellets. I mean, there's various ways of doing those now. I mean, some people buy pellet pumps and prepare them that way. And I'm a bit lazy now these days. I tend to just buy them in the pots ready to use, you know. Several companies do them, and I mean, I've found Ringers are good, Census do very good ones, Dynamite do good ones, all sorts of flavours and different scents and smells, but they all do a similar sort of job, you know.
And I don't know of fish swimming that don't like them.
Again, you know, like worms really, it's such a good bait for a variety of fish. Not good for fish such as perch and things like that, so that, you know, there are sort of drawbacks to certain species. But for general fish like carp and bream and indeed roach, you know, you can catch all sorts of fish with them, so they're very good.
It's amazing. And yet we still fall back on the traditional caster as a holding, feeding bait, don't we?
Well, not everyone, David. I mean, a lot of people now just turn up just with pellets, maybe sweet corn as well, you know, as a complementary bait. But I like to sort of give myself, when I come to a place like this, give myself chances. I suppose really I'm sort of setting my ways a little bit with ground baits and casters, you know, it's just the way we do things. But, you know, you could do it and you could have a really good day's fishing just with a pellet, really.
Do other people fish with their shot, spread? What influences your thinking when you're making up your pole rigs? Because I know you've got umpteen of them.
Yeah, I came up with a formula a few years ago on this, and it's something that served me well on a variety of venues. And what I tend to do, I mean, if you look at the float pattern, first of all, I try and keep it simple with float shapes. There's so many different shapes in the shops these days, but that sort of shape, a rugby ball shape if you like, body down, with a variety of thicknesses of bristle, it serves me well, you know, for this. I mean, this particular float's got...
But what, I noticed you've got 4 shots bulked.
Yeah, well...
What was the influencing factor there?
Well, but how I go about if I'm fishing on the bottom, in lakes or in rivers, what I tend to do is work on roughly about 0.1 of a gram per foot of water, if you like.
Right.
So if we've got 4 foot of water, as we have today, or thereon, it's 0.4 of a gram. If we've got 9 foot of water, it's 0.9 or a gram or something like that. And if you work on that sort of basis, you're not going to be far out.
Right.
You know, 6 foot, 0.6 and so on.
Yeah.
And as regards shotting patterns, well, today we're using quite big baits. You know, I'm either using a big pellet or I'm using a chunk of worm or maybe 2 or 3 casters. I'm not looking for ultra delicate presentation. I'm just looking at something to get it down quickly. So all I've done is just got a bulk of number 8 shots, about 8 or 9 inches from the hook.
Yeah.
Now what I can do with that, you see, is that if I start getting too much trouble with line bites, which it has been a bit of a problem today, I can move that right the way down near the hook,
right.
You know, to make it very positive for lift bites or whatever. I can spread it around if I want to. But I find generally, if I'm fishing at depth as I am today, a bulk of shot works pretty well. Now when you start to get into very deep water, let's say we're fishing in like 12 foot of water, well, what I'd use then is maybe, if you work on the thing of like 0.1 of a gram, we'd have about 1.25 grams or even 1.5 grams capacity. What I'd probably do then is have an olivette. I tend to use shots up to around about 3/4 of a gram. And then once you get past that, obviously we can only use lead up to number 8s. Yeah. You're using an awful lot of shot on the line. So I tend to use an untoxic olivette and then maybe 1 or 2 drop shots.
Right.
But you know, generally a very, very simple pattern for big baits like that is just a block of shot a few inches from the hook, and it's served me well virtually everywhere I've gone.
And it's simplicity itself, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, and the important thing is to make up spare rigs at home. It saves time on the bank. Just make, you know, get happy with a certain pattern of float.
Well, let's just run through your kit, because we've got a lake that holds a mixed bag of fish, including some quite big carp,
yes.
But I think you can't legislate for those, can you? So when you were thinking about today, just run me through your rig. What was going through your head?
Right, what I've done on my pole here, this is actually a telescopic top 2 pole normally, right? But what I've done, I still want to have the facility of a lightweight pole at long length. So instead of using a power kit, like many other people do these days, I've actually taken out the number 1 section and I've just fitted a big external bush on top of the number 2. Now the nice thing about that is, if I do want to convert it back again into a lightweight top for light elastics,
just take the bush off.
Yeah, and just telescope the old one. But for this, it works well. It's nice and stiff. It takes away that possibility where if you have got a big fish on a thin top break-in, which was a problem many years ago that many people had. And then what I've got here is a length of elastic, hollow elastic, running through the top 2 sections. Right. In the base of here.
And what elastic is that? What?
Well, it's a hollow elastic. It's a Drennan elastic, which they call number 6 to 8. If I could just show you what I've done at the other end, just to tension the elastic, we've got this little gizmo, this little bung at the base, and you'll see there's like a small winder, right? Now the reason for that is I can set it to the exact tension that I need it to be. Now if I'm catching skimmers or roach, I want it to be quite soft. I want it so that when it's under tension, you know, when it's set, the elastic is just creeping back into the top section.
Right.
Yeah. If I start to hook bigger fish, and let's say I haven't got any spare elastic set up in heavier diameters, all I would do is wind the elastic up to tighten it.
Right.
Yeah. And that would give me, in effect, a stronger elastic for bigger fish. But I tend to go down the route of getting it just set, just under tension, because I think it's important when you first hook the fish just to absorb that first run.
Yeah,
to stop the hook.
I think one of the problems we recognise is that if you come here geared up for the carp, you're going to bounce a lot of fish, aren't you?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Hollow elastic's obviously better for it, it's just that little bit more forgiving. Line-wise, I mean, I've just used, we've spoken many times about line diameters and breaking strains, but I work on diameters all the time now, so I'm using 0.14 millimetre, which is about 4 pound odd breaking strain. And then I've just got a barbless fine wire size 16 hook. I say fine, it's not ultra fine, but it's balanced perfectly for catching bream and roach, nice and sharp.
And it comes back to what we were talking about at Docklow, of the importance of balancing your tackle.
Absolutely. You'll see, I mean, on this rig, I've set up very, very similar arrangement, exactly the same float, same depth, but on this one I've got a slightly different elastic. This is a grey Daiwa hydro elastic.
That looks a heavier elastic.
Yeah, slightly thicker, and I've also got another top with me, which is, I think that's another one of those trains. Richard Branson's got a lot to answer for.
And just in case you didn't notice.
But this one, you see, I've got set up on a 0.16mm line. Now, if I started to encounter a lot of decent carp and I needed to speed, just to speed the process up, what I would do then is switch to a black hydro elastic. And the Daiwa hydro elastic is very, very, very popular now across the country because it's actually filled with a fluid inside the hollow tube. They're the only company that does it, and I think they've got it patented, which is why they're the only company that do it. But it's perfectly balanced to, say, 0.18 or even 0.20mm lines. And once you get that sort of arrangement on, I mean, then you start to go into the realms of maybe stronger top sections, power top kits. But I mean, generally these tops with the top section left out, it's still a nice light pole to use long, and it's well balanced, for that sort of fishing.
Better fish, Dave.
Feels like another carp, David. There's a stack of fish out there now. Every time I'm going in, I'm getting indications on the float, as the fish are bumping into the line.
And it's evidence of what you were saying earlier, that, you've built the swim slowly, and the reality is, well, it's a nice little fish.
Yeah, it's a cracker.
This is a big piece of water. You've got to be patient and let the fish come to you, haven't you?
Yeah, very much so.
And that elastic was first class, wasn't it? It just
Absolutely.
did the job.
Bang on.
Just on the inside of the mouth. Nice fish. Well, I think we've learned what a fantastic method the pole is, the way that you can be pinpoint accurate with your feeding, the way you can just move your float, twitch your float. I thought Dave's advice about how big a float to use and balance it with your shotting, balance it with your line, balance it with your elastic. As we saw there, Dave had a bigger fish, but the elastic was perfectly up to it. Having a thoroughly enjoyable day fishing with Dave, or watching Dave fish. I hope we get round to seeing you again sometime. Bye for now.